understanding what you're doing was that I heard a lot of different types of music going on in the samples for that. So what styles of dance do you teach?
Well, I teach mostly the Horton technique that the Alvin Ailey Company was trained with originally. I started with music that was very much from their own culture, and then as the years went by, they've danced to Ryuichi Sakamoto, they've danced to classical music. I bring all kinds of music in for warm-up, but I have a number of Hispanic men. Most of the people in prison in America are people of color. In my 7 years there, I've only had 2 white people. And so I start with music that honors their culture, but they, after a while, really grow to want to hear music that's unusual to them and learn from it. Do you have a question?
Not that I can put together right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Alright, so I'm going to do that same thing where I start talking about something I'm studying in another class and how it relates to this. But because I have the book here, and I was actually something we were reading about, and it was about this woman who was studying the homeless community in her hometown and talking about how when you go into like a new culture and you're studying and you're trying to be a part of it, you have to really think of yourself as the student. And that understands that you are there to learn from them and that they're your teachers. And it's just thought it was interesting because I know you were
Just speak a little bit slower.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Well, I just thought that kind of where you said that what you were doing there wasn't a good deed. You were the choreographer and they're your dance team. And I was wondering if you kind of felt that way, that you go there and you're the student being taught, or if that's kind of.
I think what you're saying is probably the most important information a person can have going in and working with people from other cultures or so-called groups at risk. I hate that word because you can hear from their words that sometimes the volunteers are more at risk and they help us. They heal us. As I mentioned, from my own childhood issues, it's been very healing being with them. But I would say that probably part of what I'm trying to do today is with you, right here in this exact moment, is the same thing. A few years ago I might have lectured and told you everything from my perspective. Now what I'm trying to do here is what you should do when you go in, which is try to have the lesson be open-ended so that they can tell you what they want. And you're not giving them information you want them to have, but you start out right away by trying to figure out what information they want. It's hard to do that with every subject matter, but I would say that's critical. And right from the beginning, it was really important to me that they didn't see me as a middle-class white lady from the left trying to help the downtrodden. Although that element is always there, because in my tradition, there's something called tekim olam. And in the Jewish tradition, it means that merely to be a good Jew, all you have to do is try to heal the world. But that's my mission, is to leave the world in a better place, but I can't do that without them. I don't have the power to do that. I need them to do that. So I think that sense of equity, especially dealing with people from other cultures, especially dealing with people who society has taken away all their power. They have no power in terms of the outside society, so you have to go in and give the power back to them, and the way you do that is to understand that they know more than you. One of the reasons I'm so glad that story about Tyrone Taylor was included is because I went in giving them a philosophy class totally from my own perspective, completely from my own perspective. And when he said, that's nice, but it doesn't make sense from where I came from in life because I didn't even know the choice to do anything different existed. A great illustration of this is a friend of mine who teaches theater said that one of the men said to her, when you see a picture of a drug dealer, you see a picture of a criminal. When I see a picture of a drug dealer, I see a picture of someone trying to support their family. So to honor their perspective and to try and see the world through their perspective, very, very good, the book that you're reading and your desire to do that. And I'm working on that all the time. You're welcome.
I guess what I'm wondering is when you started this, were these people willingly going into dance classes and excited about it, or did it take a while for them to gain mutual respect and understanding?
Well, I work through an organization called Rehabilitation Through the Arts, which is a theater group. So before I even entered into this prison, Rehabilitation Through the Arts, before I entered in, they were already studying theater, so there had been a step. There is a story, if I have time to tell you, of how I got into that prison, because the woman who is the director of Rehabilitation Through the Arts, her name is Catherine Vogins. She went to her board, and a couple of times the board said, no way we're letting dance in. You're not going to find any men that could do it. And I said to her, just let me in once, because I had been in the boys' prison for 5 years. It was the same exact population 10 years later, 20 years later, same backgrounds, same ethnic breakdown. And I don't just teach dance. I think if I just taught dance, it might have failed. But I went in there and talked about what I'm most interested in, which is the teaching of attention. And by the time I got done with my first talk, I had volunteers, and they loved it ever since. It was really easy. Really easy. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I guess this actually kind of relates to her question. So now that the program has gone on for 7 years, people in the prison who want to join the program, like how do they, can anyone go, or how does that?
Well, this particular prison has drastically changed its population in the 7 years I've been there. I'm not sure how this happens, and it certainly could be a subject that you might want to research, someone might want to research, but we have closed all of our state mental hospitals, and we're warehousing people in prison for mental people that are have serious mental illness. So this prison has become a prison that has a lot of mentally ill people and a lot of sex offenders. It's the sex offender prison. So the population of people who are not sex offenders and who are not mentally ill has gone down. And there's something called the steering committee. There's an in-house committee, and when men apply to get into the RTA theater or dance program, these men decide who comes in. And because I bring in my assistant, Bethany Moutan, and she's young and she's beautiful like all of you, and handsome, and they don't want sex offenders that have very serious crimes to be around her. So we have less people to draw from now. But they volunteer and they're screened, but in-house screened to get in. And then there's a grace period of about a year where they're on probation. They have to act right. Because there's all kinds of little problems that develop between people in prison.
Do you know if any of the people who taught, when they get out of prison, do they go on to become dance teachers or to do dance in other
I'm so glad you asked. This is why I'm wearing this t-shirt. This is the biggest miracle of my prison career. This says Figures in Flight Released. So 5 men have gotten out, and they now have their own dance company. They have a Facebook page. It's directed by a man called Andre Noel, and they've performed at Vassar College. They performed twice at the National Museum of Dance in Saratoga. They performed at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. They're performing at the 92nd Street Y coming up. They've performed at Columbia and Fordham. And they go around and they want to talk to kids and use dance to teach. And they're just starting to do their own choreography now. So that's Figures in Flight Released. And here's the beautiful logo they chose. So I'm real proud of them, and I'm in touch with them. But they're on their own. I do not interfere with them at all in terms of where they perform, how they perform, what they perform, who they talk to, because no matter how hard you try to have it be equal, you're leaving. You're walking out of there and going someplace and having dinner and being with your family and looking outside without bars on a window. So to create equality is really almost more a metaphor than a reality there. So when they got out, the one thing that I was hell-bent on was not being in charge of them, was really having them decide everything about their own dance company, with one exception. There's one guy who's getting out October 1st, and he was a bit of a problem inside in the dance group, and some of the men don't want to dance with him on the outside, so the only thing I've ever interfered with is I'm insisting they give him at least one chance. That's the only interference that I've had, because this guy deserves it. Dances his whole life. He was transferred to another prison. He got a message to me where there's no programming. This one man, whose name happens to be Flex. And he told me that in the new prison, he goes to the corner of the gym and he runs through every step and dances every chance he gets. So I want him to have a chance. But he wasn't easy to get along with, so we'll see. It's up to them.
The philosophy class that you were talking about, that you taught, is that part of the Rehabilitation Through the Arts program? Is it something like, what kinds of philosophy were you teaching to them?
Well, it's not part of Rehabilitation Through the Arts per se, because I'm the only one doing it. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the Russian mystic Gurdjieff. Anybody ever hear of Gurdjieff?
But I can't tell you anything more other than I've heard.
Well, for a particular period of my life, and it's a long story, too much to go into now, I met somebody who encouraged me to join a Gurdjieff group. Gurdjieff was a Russian mystic who worked mostly with the intelligentsia in Europe, and it was all work on attention. But it was kind of a loveless kind of work in a certain kind of way. It wasn't for me ultimately. But I spent 5 years intensively studying it, and it was all work on attention. And whatever I have permanently gained from being in that Gurdjieff group, I decided to teach the men, because the first time I walked into a second grade class to teach dance, I noticed none of the kids were paying attention. I was there to do a dance residency in a public school, and the kids were off the wall, not paying attention, so I started to try and disseminate this highly esoteric Gurdjieff work from this Russian mystic to a second grade level. And when I was able to do that and get the kids to pay attention, in 5 hours they created this extraordinary dance. And I had no intention of having this be one of the main parts of my life's work, but I started to get phone calls from other principals saying, could you come and do the attention residency? And I said, the what? And so the attention work took off, and I've worked in, I don't know, maybe 80 schools over the years doing an attention residency using dance to train kids to pay attention, to hold up their half of the learning equation. So that became such a central piece of the way that I teach that when I went into the prison, I just put it out there and for them. And I've worked with high school kids and every grade level doing that. And it was a wonderful experience to take this highly esoteric stuff and just boil it down to second grade level. It taught me a lot more about it actually than even when I had studied it. So was that an answer?
Can you spell the mystic's name?
Probably not. Let me see.
Okay.
Gurdjieff. I'm pretty sure.
And it's close enough that if you
Yeah, that's close.
Google it, it will correct it.
Hi, Sam. My husband's name is Sam.
Oh.
It's a nice old name.
So I didn't have a question, but I was wondering if maybe you could give us an example of your focus exercises or...
Oh, you know, this is amazing. I was going to start with that. I was in the bathroom paying attention to two things at once. And I said, maybe you should start the whole workshop with the Gurdjieff exercise to put people in the present. And then I said, oh, they're going to think you're so far out. You know?
Do it.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so everybody, the first thing is, and this relates to his assignment, which is one of the things I wrote down, because I loved your assignment that you gave them. If we are not present, if we are not aware of ourselves in space and really present in the moment, when we see somebody, anybody, we don't see them, we see our opinion of them, which is exactly what I think you were talking about. So that on a second grade level, I'll say, maybe when you were in kindergarten, a little girl pulled your hair, and that little girl had flaming red hair. So for the rest of your life, when you see a red-haired person, you say, I don't like red-haired people. And then I'll say to them, but maybe that boy with the red hair, maybe he's supposed to become your husband, your beloved, and you'll miss it altogether because you don't like redheads. So this is partly an example of the way I disseminate this material to second graders. And most of the time, unless we are understanding the nature of attention, attention is basically neutral. It's beaming this great, powerful body that you have and these amazing ways you can take in information. My voice is traveling to you when you're present. You are a powerful receiver of impressions and information. In our normally scattered state, you're traveling to every sound, every opinion, everything. It's like your attention's like a spitball bouncing off the walls. And it's very easy to become present. Before we do it, I will tell you that I did this for an entire auditorium in high school, this exact exercise I'm going to do. And the principal got a letter saying, I think we're going to sue the school because my son came in and said, a lady came to the school today and hypnotized the entire school. So I will now, and it's the opposite actually, but we're so unaccustomed to not being hypnotized, to truly being awake, that it's very easy to say, oh, this is strange, because usually we're in this other state. So it's very simple. Here's the most rudimentary Gurdjieff exercise, and I often start the prison program with this. Your posture is a result of your emotion and your sense of physical well-being. So one of the things you want to do to change yourself is to change your posture. So everybody put both feet on the floor. Put one hand, don't lean, come away from that. Put one hand on one knee and the other hand on the other. If you are chewing gum, stop for a moment because that's a dual rhythm. To become present is so simple but it's amazing we never do it. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Open your senses. It's not meditation. It's not going inside. Really see what's in front of you. Be aware of the space all around you, 360 degrees. Tune into the sounds we always miss because of that scattered state that we're always in. Take in information from your peripheral vision, the trees out there, the wind. Go inside enough to your body to notice if you're tired and you didn't even realize it until you became present. Stay with the weight of your body in the chair. Deepen the power of your senses. Now, if this was a dance class, I'm going to ask you to put your arms down. I'm going to ask you to press your shoulders down, and I'm going to ask you to really feel your body reaching. Reaching, reaching, reaching. Lift your arms. Look up. Keep lifting. Imagine you're pulling a star out of the sky with your right hand. Pull it and bring it down. And with your left hand, that you're gently stroking something. So that gives you a sense of moving while present. And interestingly enough, part of the Gurdjieff work is the Gurdjieff movements, which are disseminated from Sufi dancing and from many things. I don't do that. But to move consciously, it's really special. So that's a taste of the philosophy.
Okay, I actually have to choose one. Okay, what's like the most challenging moment you've had in the prison? In your work there?
I would say the most challenging moment I've had in the prison is not in the prison, but when I get home. And I have certain attachments to certain people over years, and it's very hard sometimes to leave them there. Sometimes I'll have a very exhilarating evening in the prison, and I'll be very excited when I come home. And all of a sudden, like a tidal wave, the tragedy of the situation comes over me. And for a number of years, I didn't cope with it like a very spiritual person. I would mostly sit outside my backyard, cry and drink and cry. What stopped that from happening was one Sunday night I broke my wrist by tripping outside in the midst of some huge emotional come apart about somebody. So I have had the biggest challenge for me is how to find a constructive way to absorb the pain of being there without somehow doing something that's not good for me. And I'm still working on that all the time.
Can I ask you one other question?
You can ask me as many questions as it was appropriate for the time.
Just a bit.
Can't look at the clock.
What?
Okay, right. Right.
What do you do the other 6 days of the week?
Well, I have my own dance company, a youth company of kids I've been working with since they're 5. They do very deep work, and they're on YouTube. Some of this, I don't know if there's anything recent, but they're called Figures in Flight Dance Company, and I work with them. Then I work in the schools. I write my column, and I still paint. My degree is in oil painting, but like many artists, I have developed mostly in my life, I've developed the art that I need to breathe, and I don't have to paint. Sometimes I can go 2 or 3 years without painting, but I can't go, I would say, more than a month without making a dance. So that's what I do the rest of the week. And then I have 3 daughters, and I'm very close with them. And I have a husband I've been with for 44 years, and I have a home, and I do a tremendous amount of cleaning. I would have to say, if the end of my life, all the hours of my life were tallied up, probably cleaning and parenting would be the main thing that I do. Because when you're an artist and you're always, there's a lot going on in here, I like there to be not much going on out there, so.
Do you guys, what tends to be the subject matter of your pieces? Like, do you guys have performances?
Well, you're gonna see them tonight, a lot of them, but what we're working on right now is we're working on a holiday show. I'm really excited about this. We're doing a piece by a woman named Jenny, what was that last name? Senior woman. Anyway, the name of the piece is Tear Down the House, and it's a gospel piece. It's a great piece of music, and it's all about how horrible the world is and how we have to tear it all apart, build it back up from scratch. And it's a very ballistic dance. Then they're doing a dance that I just had this dream at holiday time, because the general population comes to the shows. And there's a song by Donny Hathaway called Someday We'll All Be Free. That's just incredible, and I've been wanting to choreograph it for them, and the idea of doing it at holiday time for all those incarcerated men. And for those of you who understand some things about dance, the first part of the music sounds like waves, and so the men are actually doing flocking. Do you know what flocking is in dance? Well, it's when people dance so in unison and they keep changing directions like a school of fish or birds. And we're working on the notion that the criminal justice system will all of a sudden become enlightened and realize that people between the ages of 16 and 25, that's probably almost 85% of all people of the 2.5 million in prison, that their brains weren't developed in terms of understanding consequences. And that if they were, the sentencing should be very different for them. Like that man, Dave Navarro, who talks in there and he says, I've been in prison since I'm 18, for 25 years. He should be apologized to, and all these people should be let out. They should be let out after maybe 10 years. I'm not saying they shouldn't go to prison. Andre Noel told me it took him 10 years to calm down from being in the street. So the idea of someday we'll all be free is that all of a sudden the powers that be say, we're letting all of you out who have already served 12 years. And that they will all flock out of prison together to this song, Someday We'll All Be Free. And I've got to tell you, my artwork in dance is very corny. And all the dancers are like that. So to the point where when I talk to them about it, they're very used to me starting to cry. You know? There she goes again. You know? And then the third dance we're doing the first movement from Alvin Ailey's Revelations, I've Been Buked. And I've adapted the real choreography for them. And of course, the reason Alvin Ailey choreographed that dance was to show the world how beautiful African American people were. This was in 1953. He choreographed that dance. And for people to see the pride and the beauty and the power in African American people. So it's not much of a grand leap to think about them in prison doing that, because they have been rejected by society, they are not considered to be good people, they have been maligned, and the dance starts like this. If any of you, I don't know how many of you have ever seen it, but that music comes up. And when Alvin Ailey did it, the curtain opened, and all of his dancers were standing like this for the first part of the music. And then they all breathe together at one point, and they go, and they start this deep second plie the guys were talking about. This hand comes up, this one comes up to reach it. And then it's something like that, and it's beautiful. And that's what they're doing now in this current show. So those are the three dances we're working on.
But this is not for this season?
This is for this year.
Oh.
This is the group you just heard talking
No,
about.
no, so might we be able, some of us, I know we can't get the whole class, but we have brought
Sure.
people in the past.
Sure, I would love that. And you'll meet some of the guys that you just heard talking on the tape if you get to come.
When is it, does it have a
I
date
think it's
yet?
going to be the week of December 20th.
Oh, no, school is over.
Well,
But
then
there
maybe there might be a way to work it out, because it's life-altering to see these men dance.
Yeah.
You'll see them tonight. You'll see a lot. You won't see the group you heard. You'll see a different group.
Is there like a rehearsal or something we could possibly?
No, that's so funny. They don't let anybody in prison casually. And certainly they don't let anybody observe. Like, let's say I wanted to bring somebody from here to do a theater workshop. It's so strict now, it probably would have to be approved, and it would probably need to be approved a month in advance. It'd take a month to approve. I brought in an African dancer once. Years ago, I was able to bring in guests if they only came in once to do a workshop. Now that's not allowed. The Department of Corrections keeps changing everything. They keep changing the waters so that you have to really figure out what you're doing to swim in those waters, because they're always changing. Did you have a question?
No, not at all.
Beg your pardon?
No.
I have two. One that just came up when you were talking. Do you describe to the audience what the meanings of the pieces are, or is it more for the dancers' own personal reflection?
You know, that's such a great question, because here's an example of them teaching me. Right now I'm resurrecting a dance called Welcome to the World. It's the result of an experience I had in Afghanistan in 1970, and it's this whole thing. And I think it's my choreographed masterpiece. It's 20 minutes long. The prisoners that are out and my little dance company from the outside, they're getting together and we're remounting it. And it's going to be an amazing social justice event. Maybe that I can invite all of you to.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I was showing the dance. And as you could glean from my childhood, it's kind of a miracle, some of the things that I've done, because I was retained in 4th grade and I never graduated from high school. I eventually got a college degree, but I had a rough upbringing. And I certainly wouldn't say I had very high self-esteem, because failing doesn't give you a lot of self-esteem. But anyway, I brought this piece, Welcome to the World, into the prison to show the men. And because I had issues with wanting to be understood, having grown up with neither parent having really any ability to do anything with me, I explained the whole dance after it was over. I said, okay, I'm gonna unpack this dance for you. And there was this prisoner sitting there, his name is Dave. And he was listening, and when the whole thing got done, he looked at me and he said, you know, don't ever do that again. And I said, why? He said, you have to have more trust that people will get what you want them to get out of it, and if they don't, they'll get what they needed to get out of it. So that's a perfect example. That's a perfect example of them teaching me. Because nobody else ever said that to me, and I was explaining that dance all the time, you know? Actually, it's on, I don't have the, if last time I was here, people that were particularly interested in this event today, they friended me on Facebook, and I could send you like a clip of that dance and the beginning rehearsal with the two companies if you want.
Yeah, I had another question.
Okay, go ahead.
You were talking about how you use different styles of music that they could relate to before you started using other pieces. Do they ever want to or express incorporating their own styles of dance?
Well, we did a hip hop piece, and one of the men in the group said, in the current group, he said, my favorite dance is I've Been Buked. They're hungry for new experiences. But we did a hip hop dance, and we think that it's a good idea to do that because it actually encourages maybe other people to join. But I would say primarily we do the only style that I really know. You know, I'm limited as a teacher by my own knowledge. So we do a lot of work technique and a lot of modern.
I have a few questions also, which is first just, so how many people participate in the program at any given time? Like how does that work?
Right now, unfortunately, and this is a bit of a problem and it's scary for me, we have 7 full-time players. We have one man who just, Ozzy, the one guy who talked about, well, you could almost tell he's the only white guy from his voice quality. And he just broke his ankle, and then another one of our guys was put in solitary confinement. So the program has gotten smaller. We started out, when I first got there were about 20, and then as the population has changed, we're drawing from less people. 7 is a really scary number for me for the program continuing. So I'm hoping at this holiday show we'll create some new interest of people they'll approve of having come in.
I think when I saw it last, maybe it felt like 20 were.
It's 14. I think tonight's 14 or 15. So but they're 7 really great guys.
Yes, sorry, it's all right.
Sure, of course.
I was curious if you've ever had people quit or think about quitting because of the image associated with it. Because they were talking about like the people speaking just had such confidence in what they were doing and what it was doing for them that they were not bothered. But I imagine that the pressure could be quite intense.
Well, quitting is a big problem, period.
Mm-hmm.
We've had people quit because they had gunshot wounds, and we've had people quit because of age and ability, because we really are training dancers, as you're going to see tonight. Although I've had this one dancer, Nate, who was in his 50s, who was able to do everything. Wow. But something that happens in the prison, which again gives you that they have a very different perspective on time. So many times guys will come up to me and they'll say, I'm coming up for parole, or I have a release date in 18 months and I need to focus on that. I go, 18 months to focus, you know? But their construct of time is very, very different than ours. If they get close to that release date or close to that first parole hearing, they become completely immersed in getting letters and finishing programs and focusing on their 3 minutes with the parole board after waiting 25 years. And something that's happened to save money, and this is now giving me chills to tell you this because it's so upsetting, they now have it on Skype. The parole board doesn't even come to the prison anymore.
Huh?
Really?
Really.
It's like doing a court on Skype or something.
So much information of seeing who they are is taken up with not being there. I mean, there's so much body language and so that's the way it is. Well, you want to turn that off right now for a second?